Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Grierson. I am the senior U.S. critic for Screen International and a writer over at Rolling Stone. And it gives me great pleasure to be the host of this Q&A for Pirates of Somalia. Please join me in welcoming one of the stars of the film, Barkhad Abdi, and writer-director Bryan Buckley. So congratulations on the movie, which opens tomorrow in Los Angeles and New York. To start off, Bryan, for people who don't know, this is actually not the first film that you've done in Somalia, about Somalian characters. In terms of just background for everybody, your earlier work and what drew you to doing this film.
Yeah, definitely not the first. I don't know if it will be the last. I'm not sure. You know, it depends how tonight goes. No, we, originally I had done some work for UNHCR, a short doc on refugees, which they asked me to work. I come from the commercial side of the business, and or I'm a commercial director, and they basically were. The problem was that refugees were the UN was finding that nobody was taking on refugees. They were trying to figure out how do we get them, and they traditionally hired regular documentarians to tell the stories of refugees, and they said, why don't we get a guy who comes from the commercial business who could maybe shape something a little differently. So they got me involved, and I shot up in Kakuma. It was really primarily supposed to be for a film on the Sudanese. And I ended up meeting all these Somalis in Kakuma. They were coming in, and it was crazy. And very sad, the numbers that were coming into the camp. And the average time of year in a refugee camp in Kakuma is 17 years. So once you walk through that gate, you don't get out. And so the Somalis would take me into their houses, and they had, there was famine going on there at the time, and there was Al-Shabaab attacks, brutal attacks. And they were just so friendly. And the one thing that stood out to me was that they were so funny. They had more humor, more jokes, and you're like, you guys are joking now? This is like serious stuff. And they were survivors, and they figured out how to, and I was like, all these things, like I never knew this. And then the BBC came in, and they were covering the same doc we were. The UNHCR actually double booked the doc, and that's another whole story. So I ended up talking to them. They're like, well, we can't get into Somalia. There's a whole piracy thing going on at that time. We don't know the details. We're not allowed in there. You guys are not allowed in Somalia. It's like, no, we can't get in there. So anyway, I finished the doc, and again, short doc, and no one saw it. Like literally posted on YouTube, sent it out there, like 1,500 hits or something crazy like that. So then once that happened, I was like, this is terrible. Excuse me. And then I was home. I was in New York at the time, and I saw this another story about how the UN workers are getting attacked in Somalia, and that things had reached another level of horribleness there. And I said, God, I got to do something. So I wrote this other film called Assad, and instead of trying to do a doc, I turned it into a narrative piece. And that narrative piece, I said, if you make refugees actors, because I'm on Screen Actors Guild, so you appreciate this, your value is greater. Like people actually, whoa, wait, they're smart, they can act? Once you're an actor, you're judged completely differently. I mean, it's very interesting versus someone who's sitting there telling you their story that's really doing it. So we started this whole thing where we trained these kids and down in South Africa, because we couldn't shoot in Somalia, we shot in South Africa. We went to the community and did this Assad, and Assad would go on to get an Oscar nomination. And when I was down there, the reference book was the movie. Basically, Jay had just written this book. There was one book that existed on piracy and on Somalia that I could find. And so we used it as our Bible. And we were down there shooting, and Jay the book had just hit the newsstands, and Jay was on the Daily Show. I was like, wow, no one's bought the rights to this book, and bought the rights to the book, and the rest is sort of history.
I have not read the book, so I'm curious about, in terms of translating, because you wrote the screenplay for this as well. In terms of adapting it, was it a relatively straightforward process? I'm figuring that part of it is also figuring out who Jay is as a character and sort of conceiving his arc and his journey in this movie.
Well, it's funny. Jay he is so committed to his craft of journalism, democracy. Like, that was his true pursuit when he went over there. Is like, I think this democracy thing is really fascinating. I use piracy as a way to sort of get in there, but I'm really interested in democracy. And so that his brain worked very logically, and in his, when he was on the Daily Show, he was actually pretty humorous on that. But you meet him in person, he's a pretty straight shooting guy. The book itself, maybe 25, 40 pages tops, is designated that were about him personally. The rest was about pirates. Like, it's the densest pirate book you've ever read in your entire life. Like, every piece of information. And so it was like, when we pitched it to him to buy it, we said, I love the piracy thing. I think it's really interesting. But the Somali culture thing was my personal sort of thing that I really wanted to get out there. I knew piracy would be something we could frame around this. And then the idea that it was inspiring was that he was 24, he's going nowhere, and he just takes it upon himself to go there. And I said, that is the true core of the story, because he's imparting change. And I keep on saying there's a couple of people that I am so thankful that sort of touched me. This guy, and Barkhad, I want to call him this guy, and also Jay, because Jay was inspiring, to do this. Like, we wouldn't be here without him, and he's 32 now. So anyway, I sat down, did an interview with him, which was up in Toronto, and actually that last scene, the CIA scene, we used their plane tickets because the government flew him over for some debriefing. And then we were up in Toronto. We said, could you come out to Toronto on the way home back to Nairobi? And so he went through there. We met with him. He was, I always joke that he was kind of high on cough medicine. He was really sick. And I pulled all this information out of him, which he later on oh my God, I told you that? Because he's not that kind of guy, And in fact, that little video at the end is we were videotaping it just to, if he ever came back and said, hey, I didn't say that. I go, you watch the videotape. And so anyway, so he really opened up, and I got a lot of the other personal elements that were never included in the book. And as far as the structure, he did 2 trips there, but basically over the course of that 6 months, I just made him into one. So he came back for a second and went back, and then that everything, literally everything over there happened to one degree, and definitely all the piracy stuff, him going through all that stuff is all true, because I really didn't want to alter his story, because that would be the worst thing I could do. Like, I really wanted to stay true to that, so I stayed true to what the information was, and that was always a challenge, because no one gets shot, as you guys saw. Spoiler alert: no one gets shot. It's like, wow, that's the thing blows up. It's like, wow, shocking.
In the movie, Jay says at one point, some things in this are invented or with this, but the stewardess is exactly how it happened. The Abdi character, was that an invention? How did that?
No, true Abdi is Abdi. He had a translator, and that was his right-hand man. And that whole thing at the end when they had to get out, that's all completely true. The personality of Abdi was my translator from Kakuma, who translated for me when we were there, when we were doing the doc. And he showed up with the Obama hat and the shirt and the whole 9 yards. I'm like, we have to get the shirt. I remember the first time Barkhad saw, he was like, it was really funny. The hat, the shirts, you couldn't. It was like, I can't believe it. And I remember coming into the camp going, this guy knows more about Obama than I do, and he knows everything about U.S. politics, and that's the thing. Like, the more, like, the Marianne character talking about all the films, that was also based on Asada, the main female character in the movie, could tell me everything about American movies. He can, when he was over there too. Like, these are the things that people consume that we don't realize. Like, yeah, they might, you see, oh yeah, they're wearing a Nike shirt. No. It goes well beyond Nike. All our media reaches them. So we influence. They look at everything matters. And that's why I incorporate the Biggie video, etc., because they consume this and they think this is how we see you. Like, this is how you see us. It's really important to understand that with everything we create.
Barkhad, in terms of this script coming into your life, did you know Bryan ahead of time? Did an agent say, there's a script and they think that you're right for the part? How did you get involved with this?
Well, I didn't know Bryan at the time, but of course I know Asad. That was huge. That was the first Somali thing that made it to the Oscars. Way before I did, so props to him.
We started the Somali trend.
But once I read the script, it was sent to me by my agent, and I fell in love with the whole story, and it was just written really well, and that's when I decided to speak to Bryan, and he explained more to me, and I was head over heels to get the project going, and when it came out, and once we finished doing it, I was still surprised how well it came together, because we had a lot of rookie actors, people that never acted before, and thank God they all did well, so I'm really proud of this.
And of course, I think that relatively speaking, you're not a rookie. Obviously, you're Oscar nominated, but you're still relatively early on in your career. Did people look to you in terms of advice? Because I want to get to a thing in a second in terms of all the refugees that are listed in the credits here, but in terms of these other actors, like maybe first-time actors, did people sort of turn to you to advice because you're sort of a veteran now as an actor?
Well, it happens sometimes. If I'm needed, and some people, there's some of my friends, like Marianne, the Sabrina, she's a good friend of mine, and some of the other characters, if we're close or we're doing a scene together, of course I have to get my excuse from Bryan. But then I would help as much as I can as far as getting them confronted, just calming them down, or just whatever that might be necessary.
My understanding is that you grew up in Somalia, but you moved to Minneapolis as a teenager. Yes. So in terms of actually developing this character, developing the world of this movie, when you were reading the script, did you talk to Bryan about sort of particulars about Somalia that you knew, or did you read Jay's book in terms of kind of getting the sense of what a country and what a culture is like? I'm kind of curious about that.
Right. Well, to be honest with you, I left Somalia when I was 7 years old. But we have a large community in Minnesota. But what really helped me develop this character was I went to Somalia with ADESO, an NGO humanitarian agency, in 2015. And they put me in similar car that we shot the movie with. And we had the bodyguards sitting behind us, just almost identical. So that experience helped me. I even interviewed some fishermen for CNN Inside Africa. So that whole segment kind of helped me prepare for this character.
Bryan, in terms of finding your Jay, Evan Peters, what was that process like? And I guess maybe what were you looking for from an actor?
Well, it's interesting. Evan came in on another film I was working on, and he, and this is good again for actors, came in for another film. I'm like, that's my lead for I was a small part on the other film. I said, he's the lead for this movie. I'm going to build that movie around him. Like, he came in and read completely. He had no idea. I'm like, 2 years from now, I'm coming after you. Yeah. And, the challenge that we have is when you say is like, how do you build both from the financing standpoint to the actor standpoint, how do you build around that? Because I knew he had the chops. Like, and to me, the best part of what I personally do is discovery. Like as a director, I really don't have a lot of interest in going down something that's been done before. Now you can say, okay, Barkhad was in the Pirates, obviously in Captain Phillips, but I wanted him to against himself, the other side, and it was like, because I knew. You meet any Somali, they are so proud of their country. It's unbelievable, the love for Somalia. They've been forced out of there, but their love for the Somalia does not end. It's forever. It's the tightest community you'll ever meet. So I knew, like, I had a feeling Barkhad would respond well to the material, but playing against himself. So in case of Evan, like, I knew I just loved the idea that he's done, you know, he's obviously very successful in the television world, and he's done amazing work. But it was funny, when I saw him audition for me, I had never seen American Horror Story. I just saw that performance in that minute, and I was like, this kid is so talented. He's so talented. And just to throw him and give him that opportunity, and was my goal. So then you just have to figure out, okay, how are we going to make that movie, and how are we going to get that done and get it financed, et cetera, you know?
Because it's a challenging role in certain ways, because Jay comes to a great place eventually in terms of sort of understanding the culture and really trying to represent it. But at the beginning, it's partly because he's looking for a break. You know, he's looking for, you know, he has like these ambitions, and so Somalia seems like a great kind of way, even though he had the class assignment that he did. In terms of the arc of the character, was that something that you had to sort of kind of work on to figure out from A to B where this guy is sort of going emotionally throughout the story?
Well, I mean, again, it's interesting when you write. Jay gave it to me. Like, Jay, in their interviews, I saw where the arc had to go because I witnessed it right in front. You know, I continue actually his evolution as a person even to today. Like, I've seen him continually evolve. But it was clear, like, you know, he wanted a voice. Jay really wanted to be heard. And those stories are all based on the interview. The parking ticket thing, all this stuff's legit. Like, and you know, his rejections, the napkins, legit. But the idea that at first I just want to be noticed, that was number one. And there's this love of Somalia, and then, okay, piracy is going to work, and then sort of that evolution as he started to fall in love with the people, and then suddenly became this, you know, part of this of championing their cause. That was the real Jay. So it was very easy for me to do that. And then working with Evan, I mean, honestly, Evan, there was my script, and then there was his notes on my script. Like, the amount of thinking he gave into every page. He would never tell me, like, it wasn't like, oh, I'll rewrite this line or that. He had a couple little notes in the script. It was his personal notes on that script, which was like this Bible. And then he'd spring these things, you know, and that was what was beautiful working out with Barkhad, because actually the first time, I mean, I obviously saw Barkhad in Captain Phillips, but, you know, his comedy was a little sketchy there. I got to be honest. I wasn't really confident, you know, in the comedy element. And I saw him actually in this interview on Conan. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy is so funny. And sadly enough, that's what directors do. We actually look at interviews going, can they be funny? Because you always hear, Agent always says, oh, they're really funny. Right. Yeah, they always say that. You're like, where? Like, and they go, you know, so you always, comedy is like, all right. And then you watch from these talk shows, you're like, they're not funny. You know, where's it going to come? Anyway, he was really funny. And so I was like, okay, put them together, and watching also how you react off of somebody, like in a split second. So you guys would throw stuff at each other. So it'd be scripted, but then they'd move and bob a little bit. And it was really fun to watch within that script and come up with these very, very important little beats. And Evan, again, had that opportunity, you know, he could do that. So he thought through everything. The hardest thing we had to deal with is that stupid beard. You know, like, that thing was a pain in the ass. It's like, you know, because when Evan put his beard on, he was a complete asshole. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, and when he had his normal face, and he's the nicest guy I ever met, because he would go into this character like, what is wrong with Evan today? He's like being such a jerk. Like, and it's like, oh yeah, it's a beard day today. Like, you know, he's like all skitzed out on cot, and, you know, like, he come around like he's completely different, you know, like, and he really immersed himself into that. And same with you, Barkhad. Like, they'd enter into the zone. It was so much fun to watch, you know. Yeah.
Because that's what I was curious about in terms of with you and Evan. Did you guys rehearse beforehand? Did the two of you have time? Because I feel like the relationship that the two characters have is so kind of central and important. Was there time beforehand for the two of you to sort of work on the script together? Did you have time to sort of hang out, or was it really sort of going into the shoot and then kind of figuring it out there together?
Well, we did some reading, yeah?
Yeah.
We did some reading at the beginning, but before every scene, we would, you know, sit together, me and him and Bryan, and discuss how we're going to do it. So, you know, it's a different every day. So, you know, it's just a matter of how we're going to bring it to life and, you know, just give it, you know, that feeling that it's real. So you know, it's just, you know, day to day, you know, someday he's not there, I'm not there, you know, so we just have to work together and until we find that inch. And as far as our friendship that you see in the movie, I think that's how our friendship really was developing between us. And so we're basically strangers before the movie, and we got to know each other as we won. So at the end when we're saying goodbye, that was really sincere.
Because the work that you've done, whether it's Captain Phillips or Eye in the Sky or A Good Time, which I think you're fabulous in, by the way. If you haven't seen the movie, he's really, really great in it. There's such an openness and a presence that you give. It's just sort of like you are just sort of there on screen. You know, Brian mentioned on the beard days that Evan was kind of an asshole. In terms of when you are on, it's a day for you to shoot. Are you the type of actor who feel like you kind of go into a character and kind of go into a mode, or are you really just sort of, because you're so open on screen, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of furrowed brow kind of thought. It just seems like it's just coming very naturally. And I'm curious, the actual process for you, is it that natural for you?
Well, it doesn't come easy, you know, it takes time. So, you know, it's to make it look that natural, it's different from scene to scene, and of course how I'm feeling, and you know, to get my self in that situation, especially when it's, you know, a serious scene or, you know, whatever emotion that's needed. So, you know, it's different how I do it from time to time, but mostly it's just mentally for me. You know, I have to lock in mentally and have to just vision it. If I can vision it, you know, I can. Yeah. So.
Assad, you shot in South Africa. Where did you shoot this?
Yeah, South Africa. So we tapped into the same community that we were there prior, a community of refugees that settled in there. Tiny bit is shot Southern Sudan. We used some of the stuff from we shot there on a dock. And we sent Jay into Somalia because he's in and out of there still with a camera to pick up some B-roll footage. And Kenya, but it was all that was down there, and really Assad was the dry run, you know, for that. I would have never attempted to do this movie without having done a short and work with the community, and I think Barkhad's selling himself very short in terms of his participation in helping out, you know, organize and put together, you know, because really, essentially, what we had was one community to draw talent from. And then the training that went into that was pretty extensive, you know, over several months to get the non-actors to become actors, because we knew they had it in them. And you know, showed up and then continued to workshop them. That part was very, very specific, so that when Evan and Barkhad would move into a scene, we couldn't be still figuring out, you know, their line. They had never done this before. What's a mark? You know, like, hey, what's an eye line, you know? And you're speaking Somali. I mean, like, then there's all the Somali. He's doing all the Somali translations. So, like, I wrote the script, and we brought a translator in that would then write it all in Somali, because so the script went from like a 2-hour, you know, an hour and a half movie to like a 6-hour movie. I was like, oh my God, this is all Somali. And then we had to figure out how to condense what he's saying down, because he had to do all these translations. And then even when we're shooting, like, what's a quicker way to sort of tell that story that wouldn't sit there and someone from Somalia go, that makes absolutely no sense. Like, that would be the worst thing ever. So you had to like tell the story twice and leave the audience, because there's no subtitles. And the movie has like 5 subtitles. The idea was to leave people thinking, and so he you know, again, in his performance would take something from someone, translate it, and then leave us on the edge of our seat to what he just said, or maybe sometimes say something completely different than what that person said, just to sort of keep us on edge. You know, it's interesting.
You know, Jay in the movie is going into a culture that he doesn't know a lot about and kind of learning. You had already had the experience doing the documentary and then doing Assad. Doing this and shooting in South Africa, was there still a bit of a learning curve? I mean, I've never been to either South Africa or Somalia, so in terms of making places look like this is what Somalia would look like, is it relatively easy? Do they look relatively?
No, it's very specific. Yeah, the production design, again, we're on a limited budget. So it's not like you can call a studio up and say, let's build this. And also there's the issue of community. So, the Somalis, when we went in there and did Assad, xenophobia was rampant. I mean, they literally were burning Somalis as we were shooting Assad. There's a lot of tension there, Things had subsided a bit, but things are very tense. There's, we shot in slums, that things were really bad there. I mean, beyond bad. And until you go to a slum there and then you show up, you can't fathom what that is, okay? And the ones we shot in were actually the nicer slums, better ones, but still, so you have to work with that community, and then say the Somalis come in, and then they have to coexist. Why, we're playing the UN, a bunch of, filmmakers going, hey guys, craft services over here, enjoy it, and that sort of thing. And that, that is the thing. On the first film, we learned a lot. We were the first film down there, so we learned a lot of hard lessons, and for instance, if you're going to talk about Al-Shabaab, it's like, that's some serious stuff. And I remember, put somebody in the wrong wardrobe, and that could mean their family will die in Somalia. Fact. If the families find out. If Al-Shabaab decides that they're going to do something about that because you filmed something negative against us. And so I had, you had to be aware of that. Prayer, you have to respect prayer. Can't, you will not tell them when, prayer every, you have the prayer 5 times a day, and you have to respect that time. All these things have to be built into the production schedule, and in respect really every element of it. And again, I use Barkhad because he's remarkable in many, many ways. That he would give me heads up on things, or we know because it'd be everybody speaking in Somali around us, like, what does that mean? So you have to really listen to these things, because if you don't, they'll go back and work in the shop tomorrow. Like, my actors are like, well, I literally have actors go, hey, I got to work at the store tomorrow, so I can't show up. That kind of stuff, and you're not used to that. We had cot dealers who got arrested, and she couldn't show up, and it's like, well, no, it's like, what do you mean she got arrested? She goes, yeah, she's dealing cot, and it's like, you're kidding me, like, because she's supposed to be like the sidekick to Marion, and it's like, so it's all this sort of like, you just got to roll with the punches. And again, like, because I like speaking here, because obviously you're committed to the craft. It's like, and there's nothing. It's so much fun when you have an ecosystem like that you're giving opportunities to. Because acting is one of those places you can do it, but it doesn't mean it's just interesting because we put so much value on it here, and there it's like survival and oh yeah, I'll act. So anyway, it's you find these crazy rules that go along. Yeah.
Barkhad, in terms of when you guys went to film, did people know who you were? Did they recognize you?
South Africa?
Yeah. Did people know?
Yeah, they knew it because I was familiar there. Beside the fact that people know, but I shot there. I shot a few movies there in Cape Town. I shot Eye in the Sky, also Brothers Grimsby, who also shot in Cape Town. So I was familiar with the city and the community, and I had some friends that, did Eye in the Sky with me as well. So
he's Marlon Brando of Somalia. I'm not kidding. Like, once she had Barkhad on board, it's like, you got Barkhad? It's like, Marlon Brando's going to do this? Like, it did open. Trust is everything. It's everything. They've been through so much as a community, screwed over, not paid, showed up. They've gone through 2 countries or 3 countries just to get to Somalia. Like, to South Africa. They have been through hell. So all of a sudden you show up and go, hey, yeah, I want you to do this thing. They could get screwed over. So he was sort of like, no, it's okay, it's cool. And we gave him Barkhad's number, cell number, everything. They said, just call this guy.
You had said at the beginning that the people that you were working with, they've absorbed American culture. They know movies like the characters in the film, but still, like actual film sets and film crews. This was in South Africa, but during the end credits, you have the list of all of these refugees, and I'm curious about if you can tell us more about that and finding these people and putting them on the film.
Yeah, I mean, really, anybody who's Somali who is in South Africa is a refugee, you know, and Barkhad is a refugee, you know. The ones that got to anyone in South Africa has been lucky enough to get to South Africa, you know, I think. And though, you know, the camps are very full up to the north, they have the freedom to sort of move about, you know. So by virtue, you know, and it's interesting because I'll bring up a bigger issue at hand. Of course, there's a travel ban going on right now, and that Barkhad, you know, at this point doesn't end up in America, period. Right? It's crazy, right? And the refugees that we have that worked in this film, I mean, we started a year and a half ago trying to see if they could get them over for anything. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to come here. They're not allowed to come into this country, yet they bring this craft and this art here, and it's completely tragic. It's easy to find refugees, you know, in those countries, and they don't all want to act, that's for sure, but they are there, and they're trying to make a new life for themselves. They can't go back to Somalia. I mean, they can't. They love their country, and sometimes they do for a bit and back, but there's nothing there for them, you know, and the reasons why they left, whether it's political or whatever, they had to leave. So they're sort of stuck, you know, in this world. And to me, it really wasn't, making this movie wasn't about refugees. Is just a product of this piece. It's showing you Somalia, not really refugees, but there's no other option but refugees. I can't go to Somalia because I can't even get in there, you know, to shoot this type of film. It would be impossible. So, but going to the communities and finding them and building something, like I said, like an ecosystem with them that they can be proud of, and that we're not using them to exploiting this culture for us to show things that drive fear, or, you know, there is fear to the element to this movie, but to show really what they're about. It was so easy to get them on board. I mean, there was more laughter on our set. I use this as an example, and I remember we shot all night, one night, and you know, usually, you know, night shoots are a nightmare. Everybody like goes in their trailers and they sleep and stuff. And we're shooting all night, and I keep on up and say, guys, can you just stop the laughter, because we can't hear. We're shooting here. This, you know, they'd be like the scene, and because the Somalis don't, like, they talk. And then Evan was part of the laughter. Like, Evan didn't go into his trailer. Like, Evan stays there all night. He's done. We're done with you, Evan. You go home. No, man, I'm gonna stick around. Like, all night long. You know, like laughing, and it was so much. Like, you know, there was such a positive thing that's been on this movie, you know, and we premiered last night, and it's just like, you know, his friends and all came over to us. It's like, it's very positive, you know, and we need that. I mean, I'm so happy, like, no matter what happens, like, honestly, I don't care about opening night, like the box office, whatever. I care that it gets in front of people to get something positive, and realize the gift that we have here, this man, that culture, and appreciate it, you know, because it's a beautiful thing.
Barkhad, one of the questions that someone wrote beforehand was for you specifically about working on Captain Phillips from a few years ago, done a bunch of films since then, some television as well. What things have you learned as an actor? Things that now you look back and go, oh, I would have done this differently, in terms of like what you've learned about acting, the craft of acting, because I also saw the Conan interview that you're talking about, and that's one of the things I remember that you talked about with Conan, was like, it wasn't like necessarily you had thought about being an actor, but there just weren't the opportunities, and then these opportunities finally started to happen. In terms of things that you've learned in terms of the craft of acting in a short time, I'm curious what you've learned.
Well, you know, I learned a lot, you know, with every project. You learn something, you know, the more you do something, whatever it is, especially with this movie, you know, I'm doing something different than I was used to. So, you know, it's a lot of learning. It's a lot of, you know, pushing your limits, you know, so it's a learning experience, you know, as a human, you know, you keep on learning, you know, if you say you know it all, you're lying. You just have to keep it going. So that's my answer. Yeah.
Well, also, just something that Bryan mentioned about this character is sort of the polar opposite of your character from Captain Phillips. Like, this is the other side of it. Was that how you thought of this character in terms of him being sort of like the marked difference from that character from Captain Phillips? That was a much more sort of aggressive, angry, desperate character. This one is not so much that way.
It's very different than that character, and this is who I am normally. I think this is close to my personality, this character in some ways. So it's really different. It was really different, but it has its own challenges as well.
Because it's more like you? Because there's such a sweetness in this guy. I mean, he like Bryan said, this character's really funny. He's really funny. He's really likable. You trust him. You can see why Jay trusts him. So when you said there are challenges, I'm curious what you mean by that.
No, some of the scenes, is like that scene. He wakes me up from sleep. That was hard, and there's a few other scenes. It's like you just have to. Get that out and be in the moment and, just, focus. Yeah.
So I have to ask about Al Pacino. You talked about this a little bit before, Bryan, but I'm curious, like, had you always thought Al Pacino would be right for this part? How did that come about?
Yeah. It was, Al... To me, listen, who doesn't sit down and write a script without, old guy, funny character. It was funny. I mean, the funny story is that Seymour Cassell was my neighbor where I lived in over on the shores. And so I modeled that person. Like Seymour used to say the most outrageous things, and it was like the most outrageous neighbor you could ever have. I don't know if anybody knows him here, but anyway, so I was like, that was the model of the character, but then Pacino was who I had to be Pacino. So it was like, I combined those two things, like the real Seymour Cassell into Al Pacino, and that's what we ended up with there. Was
it much of a struggle to actually get Pacino? I mean,
no, it's pretty easy. I just called him up. I couldn't believe it. He's listed. It's crazy. The funny thing was like, I mean, the Al Pacino story. Yeah. So the process of casting is madness, right? And we all know, like, you send the script out, like, oh my God, here it's going to go out, and especially the early process where no one thinks it's real, right? So Al went out. Yeah. Weeks go by. No Al. No, don't pass. Is it a pass? Does he not want it? It's like, no, nothing. So then I happened to have a meeting over at UTA, and I was like, did Al Pacino ever get the script? Because did he pass? Did he see the script? Well, let's go upstairs and talk to his agent. It's like, all right, let's go upstairs and talk to the agent. He goes, all right, so there was, one and said, all right, so did Al see the script? And he goes, and I won't give you the numbers because I don't give the money part of it. But I said, so, and they you offer like nothing. There's a pile of scripts. And goes, if you want Al to at least look at it, you got to offer something. So we're like, okay, so we put the money in there on the table, but the understanding that just to even get to a point where he's going to look at it, it's like you have to put money on the table. That's real, and that's the reality of the business, right? So, anyway, then all of a sudden he read it, and he's like, he likes it. Like they're like, it's a miracle. Like, Al likes it. No, that went on for a few weeks. Al likes it. Give a meeting. I don't know. And finally, I was like, Al wants to meet with you. And you're like, oh my God, this might actually happen. So I met with him in New York, and we discussed the script. And Jane Rosenthal, who worked on this, produced it. She's De Niro's producer and does all this stuff. And so she was instrumental. Like, I had her call him. She goes, oh yeah, Al, 'cause she's doing a film with him now. And, so that all helped this process that went on for months. you know, because he really considers his roles very, very, very seriously. So, I mean, that was the coolest part. Like, there were so many cool moments with Al because you realize that's why he's Al. Like, he does all his own negotiations, basically. He reads everything. He's still, to this moment, like, involved in his business. And I think as actors, you have to understand this is so important. This guy's same thing. You got to look out for yourself. No one else can look for it except for you as an actor. Yeah.
Barkhad and Bryan, very nice to meet both of you. Congratulations on your movie. Thank you all very much. Good night.